The Army has signed on to the Air Force's Joint All-Domain Command and Control. The two branches will create data sharing standards within the next 2 years to feed the system that will let warfighters in both branches share information on the battlefield. Bob Work is former Deputy Secretary of Defense. Bob, welcome. Thanks for coming on the program. What's the intersection of what the services are doing with JADC2 and the artificial intelligence work that the JAIC is doing and that you started when you were in DOD?
Well, Francis, good to be here. This time reminds me a lot of just after Vietnam, when the Joint Force turned its attention back to the Soviet Union and realized that the Soviet Union had a new campaign plan that was very stressing and started to call into question the U.S. ability to deter an attack on Western Europe. And it triggered a period of intellectual foment and concept development. And that's what's happening now. Now, I'd like to correct just one thing you said. It's not the Air Force's JADC2. It is truly the Joint Force. Back in October 2019, at the Senior Leadership Council, the Secretary of Defense said, we are going to need to have a new joint warfighting concept to take on a peer competitor like China or Russia, who are as good at battle network and guided munitions warfare as we are. What that means is they could look deep and see what we were doing, shoot deep with long-range guided munitions, and kill deep because the guided munitions were going to hit what they were shot at in most cases, unless they were intercepted. And what happened was there are 4 functional concepts are going to be associated with this. One is command and control, one is fires, one is information advantage, and one is contested logistics. Now, General Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said, Air Force, you're responsible for the C2 aspects of this. You're going to be the ones who think this functional concept through for the Joint Force. Navy, you're going to look at fires. Marines, you're going to look at information advantage. And Army, you're going to look at contested logistics. So the Air Force is moving out on this idea, and JADC2, Joint All-Domain Command and Control, is very much a joint concept that all 4 of the services have signed up for. So the Army name for this is Project X and Convergence, and it does the same thing that the Air Force JADC2 project does. And all that's happened so far is the Army and the Air Force have completed a handshake and said, we are going to make sure we're totally integrated, that our exercises are integrated. We're going to have exchange officers. We're going to have constant concept development meetings. So, like I said, it's an exciting time. This is exactly how air-land battle was born. The Air Force and the Army worked together to develop the concept, and then they tested it out, and they pursued the capabilities that would allow both of them to pursue it.
Being the history nerd that I am, Bob, I appreciate your reference to the post-Vietnam era. And I wonder, to go in a different direction than we anticipated, what continues to foster the same type of intellectual development, the same type of innovative development that happened in the 1975 to 1985 period? What can we do now to see that same type of gain happen in the 2020 to 2030 window?
I think you were seeing it. Same thing happened. After Vietnam, we came out of Vietnam. Our gear was all worn out. We had been focused on fighting a regional adversary with a lot of unconventional warfare aspects to it. And we turned our attention back to the Soviet Union. They had completely modernized. They had a new concept of operation, which called for attacking NATO in echelons, in successive waves of forces. And what they were trying to do is punch a hole in the NATO defenses, and through that hole, they would push what was called an operational maneuver group, a fast-moving armored column, deep into NATO's rear. Now, the reason why I wanted to do this was to prevent NATO from turning to tactical nuclear weapons to stop their attack. And the Army and the Air Force said, hey, look, the way we're structured now and the way we're planning to defend won't work. Well, the same thing has happened. We've had enormous conventional advantage since the end of Cold War. For the last 25, almost 30 years, the U.S. has had an advantage in that it employs guided munitions at a much higher scale than anybody else, and it has the battle network, the command and control to actually fire these guided munitions at discriminate targets which achieve effects on the battlefield. And what has happened is the Chinese and Russians have caught up. So our old way of doing business for the past 30 years doesn't work anymore. So that's what has triggered the intellectual foment. The services have all got together and said, how are we going to fight against a Russia or a China? And how do we convince them that we can win that fight, which is the way to have deterrence? You convince the military planners on the Russian and Chinese side that if they choose to exert military force, that they are most likely going to lose if they go up against the U.S. joint force.
I apologize for turning this into a philosophical and existential discussion, Bob, rather than a focus on JADC2. It's great to have you here, and I'd love to continue this dialogue. It's a fascinating way to look at what we're up against. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much, Francis.